When the Great War started, Washington DC was naturally one of, if not the first locations, to be targeted by enemy warheads, but that came later. In the years leading up to that dreadful day, the city changed quite a bit. It was fortified against nuclear attacks, buildings such as the Pentagon and other historical structures had their corners reinforced to ensure their survival. Infrastructure was upgraded too. Power cables were buried deep beneath the earth to provide a steady flow of energy, which survivors still find ways to exploit even now. Many systems were also fully automated, designed to operate centuries into the future without maintenance, like the presidential metro, which connected the White House, the Capitol building, and Adams Air Force Base. In 2065, that metro became fully automated thanks to the Metro Authority Rapid Governmental Transit System, or MARGoT, a ZAC supercomputer that 200 years later is still more or less running as intended. Another major addition was the Anchorage War Memorial, located on FDR Island in the Potomac River, honoring the soldiers who fought and died during the Battle of Anchorage, a conflict the United States won on January 10, 2077. But liberating Anchorage from the People's Republic of China marked, at least for me, the beginning of the end. 2 months after their victory, key military, civilian, and corporate leaders abandoned Washington, anticipating a nuclear or biological strike from China. Figures like the president and many members of Congress and the military, those who would later become the Enclave, disappeared, retreating to locations such as Raven Rock in DC and Control Station Enclave off the coast of California. Half a year later, in October 2077, the American offensive pushed deep toward Beijing, and further precautions were taken in preparation for nuclear war. The National Guard mobilized across the nation, with units concentrating in DC, and auxiliary forces covering the more rural regions, ready to evacuate civilians to safer locations. When the inevitable finally happened, the armed forces mobilized and civilians sought shelter. The vaults filled, families clambered into homemade bunkers, and others placed their faith in Pulaski preservation shelters. In the end, it made very little difference. DC was targeted in waves, and the bombs reduced the region to ash, though the city center, protected by its heavy construction, fared slightly better than the surrounding region. What truly brought Washington down wasn't the bombs, but the fire. Intense thermal radiation set the city ablaze, and the inferno raged for weeks. The National Mall was one of the few areas in the region safe from the bulk of the damage, and those stranded there sought refuge in the museums.
I was in a shelter with my father when the bombs hit. In DC, we had the luxury of getting a warning after the West Coast was gone. I was just a little girl then. We couldn't afford a space in one of the vaults. I remember filing down into that shelter, my father rushing me in. He stopped to help this one family, and I looked up and called his name. There was a flash of light brighter than anything you can imagine. I woke up a few hours later. The first thing I did was run up to where my father had been. He was gone. But the strangest thing, there was his shadow, burned into the wall, so crisp and clear, like he was standing next to me. The heat had burned it into the concrete. The city was on fire for weeks, maybe months, I don't know. I hid down here in the museum. It was the closest building to the shelter I was in. I could hear what was happening above. People howling like animals, chaos, looting, killing. It's like every foul thing inside of them came out. It was a nightmare. I don't want to talk about it.
Beyond the city, things were much worse. What remained of the military joined surviving auxiliary units and local authorities who were desperately trying to maintain order amid the chaos. With top-level leadership gone, dead, missing, or having joined the Enclave, relief efforts quickly fell apart. Those left did what they could, but it wasn't enough. Military checkpoints sprang up to control the flood of refugees escaping the city, and tons of irradiated soil were dumped into makeshift containment zones, such as the tunnels beneath the mall, which were later sealed off entirely. yet their efforts were far too little to change the outcome. Desertions were rampant, worsened by the high death toll among refugees exposed to radiation, and by the authorities' dwindling ability to provide even the most basic care for survivors and themselves as well. As society and relief collapsed, the last remnants of order disintegrated, plunging the wasteland into a long-lasting chaos. In one final act of irony, a dry-docked aircraft carrier at the Washington Naval Yard attempted to set sail for greener pastures, only to run aground and beach itself, stranding everybody on board. Once the fires died, the survivors emerged, and settled where they could, though it took a generation before the first settlement was established, all thanks to their pre-war planning. A large number of citizens believed that the US government had become hopelessly corrupt, and the country was in grave danger from anarchists, liberals, and communists. These individuals relocated to remote rural locations, established private militias, and promised that they would one day take back the government for the people. They never got the chance. The bombs fell, shattering all world governments, and most of these separatist communities were killed in the war or in the chaos that followed. However, one group dug in deep enough and survived the worst of the first few decades, eventually becoming the Republic of Dave, which is a story for another time. As for those unable to find shelter, they flocked to wherever they could. One example can be found right outside of Vault 101's door. The remains of several people are found here, still clutching the signs they waved to the Vault's cameras, begging as they did to be let inside. Most of them realized they were never going to get inside the vaults and found refuge in the unlikeliest of places. A nearby crater caused by an undetonated nuclear bomb, which protected them from the dust storms, and once those had passed, many survivors started wandering the new world in search of food and goods, which they then brought back to the crater to trade with the others. In time, it became a full-on trade hub, with caravan routes, a water processing plant, food stalls, and large scrap metal walls, primarily made from old pre-war planes, that kept the residents safe. Not all survivors were as lucky as the people who founded Megaton. For those who survived but lacked the materials or knowledge to rebuild, became raiders, stealing and killing for anything they could get their hands on, leading many survivors to actually leave the area. A number of them emigrated to Appalachia, joined by a group coming from the Pit and other parts of Pennsylvania. Together they took a train from Union Station out of the region, going on to create Foundation. Some such settlers described the capital wasteland as hell on earth. Naturally, when raiders need people to prey on, and those people leave, the raiders and slavers tend to follow. So while life in Appalachia might have been a better place, it was far from perfect. And while DC might have been hell on earth for humans, ghouls on the other hand, like William Keller, migrated to the capital wasteland to avoid persecution, believing the radiation there would act as a buffer between him and other people, and he was right. Even though ghouls lost a number of things they held dear, family, friends, their own voices, and the taste of food, they didn't need to suffer alone. As a new community formed in the ruins of the capital city, a place built by ghouls for ghouls, called Underworld. However, while it might have been the go-to place for ghouls in Pennsylvania, they and many others still faced hardship on a day-to-day basis. Children on a field trip were trapped in lamplight cabins and struggled to find food. Many vaults, said to be havens, began their experiments, and everyday creatures, once ordinary and beautiful, started to change. While most of the wildlife died out and the ecosystem was severely damaged, some species adapted. Mirelurks and Mirelurk kings were some of the first creatures to appear, and perhaps had the biggest mutation. Some are a strange mix between horseshoe and blue crabs, others an unknown turtle species, all of which have adapted to survive in the radioactive waters of the semi-dried up river. They still breed, lay eggs, and inhabit watery sections of the river, certain sewers, and dank sections of the flooded metro. But for whatever reason, the mutation has caused the creatures to walk on two legs, almost like a human, and the turtles now have powerful sonic attacks. At least their meat is still edible, and have kept survivors fed ever since they emerged. Black bears, or yaoguai as they have come to be known, also survived, though they have changed slightly. The minimal hair and dead eyes are the two biggest changes, almost as if they were blinded and burned in the Great War. Even though they appear similar to other ghoulified creatures, and some ghoul bears do exist, more often than not, they are still the same as their pre-war selves. They hunt, have cubs, and live in dens. Sometimes they work together when hunting becomes too difficult, which it almost always is. While yaoguai are extremely dangerous, they can be tamed, as seen with the Scavenger's yaoguai, a great ally considering how dangerous the Wasteland can be. Other smaller creatures have also changed. Ants, scorpions, and flies all grew in size. Mole rats too. While dogs largely stayed the same, cats, fish, and many other animals disappeared completely, either lost in the war or consumed by Wastelanders to extinction. The only creature whose purpose and impact hasn't changed is cattle, though the cows that survived the Great War did give birth to calves with 2 heads, now called Brahmin, a trait that never went away. The relatively stable ecosystem that emerged in the capital Wasteland is disturbed by a single unique type of creature, supermutants. These giant, yellowy-green mutated humans, transformed through FEV, have a rudimentary level of intelligence and are capable of constructing simple structures and clothing, as well as operating tools of varying complexity. A fixture on the Wasteland since 2078, they became a permanent nuisance, transforming people to bolster their numbers, but never achieving major success due to their brain damage and lack of organization. Compared to the rest of the United States, the capital Wasteland appears to suffer from severe contamination. Even 2 centuries after the war, the remaining radiation continues to interfere with agriculture, with all but the hardiest mutated plants able to take root in the contaminated soil. Most cities cannot support regular agriculture and trade for the necessary food, with a large part of their diets consisting of pre-war food, meat from hunted animals, and in some cases, humans too, but they also have access to mutated fruit, either mutated berries called mutefruit or mutated apples called crunchy mutefruit. There is fresh fruit and vegetables too, potatoes, apples, pears and carrots, but those are reserved for either scientists with the knowledge to grow them or those with the funds to buy them, but most people will live on whatever they can get their hands on. Most people living in the capital Wasteland have never seen living trees or flowers, but that's not to say they don't exist.
Here's a question for all you faithful listeners. Have you guys and gals ever seen a tree? No, not those shriveled black things. I'm talking real trees. Brown bark, green leaves, photosynthesis, all that good stuff. Now what if I, the all-powerful 3-dog, Bow Wow Wow, were to tell you that somewhere right here in the capital Wasteland, there's a place with lots of trees. A veritable oasis of green in that depressing sea of brown. Look, it was years ago, and I may have been experimenting with Jet at the time, but I'm telling you, it's out there.
The rumors are true, and much like the mutated fruit, a new species of tree with no pre-war equivalent is growing here, albeit from the top of poor Harold's head. A tree that could, under the right conditions, bloom and spread across the Wasteland. I've already covered Harold in a previous video, so I won't go into too much detail, but he does play a major part in something else that's changed since the bombs fell: religion. In the capital Wasteland, religion did not vanish with the bombs, but it was stripped down to its bare essentials. Organized faith, as it existed before the war, didn't survive. Churches burned, masses scattered, and religious authority meant very little in a world where survival came first. What remained were fragments, personal beliefs, and new faiths shaped by fear, loss, and radiation. For many survivors, belief became less about salvation and more about explanation, a way to make sense of a world that no longer followed the rules of the old one. You can still find chapels, shrines, and individuals who speak in familiar religious language, but they're almost always in isolation. There are no great movements, no unified churches, only individuals finding comfort where they can. In places where stability returned, these older beliefs had room to breathe. Rivet City's St. Monica's Church, led by Father Clifford, practices a largely traditional form of Christianity, offering prayer, confession, and guidance, much as it would have done before the war. Others adapted their beliefs to fit the new world entirely. The most prominent example is the Children of Atom, who see radiation not as a curse, but as a divine force. To them, the Great War was not an ending, but a form of creation. Their faith reflects a generational shift. For those born into the Wasteland, radiation is not an abstract horror, it is a constant presence, something to be accepted, explained, and sometimes worshipped. Belief also formed around certain people, rather than gods. Harold, transformed by the forced evolutionary virus, became an object of reverence to the tree minders, not because he claimed divinity, but because he represented hope. In a dead world, something was still growing, and the people who found him fell to his roots and became his followers.
He is the one who grows, he is the one who gives, and he is the one who guides. No one speaks his name out of reverence for his majesty. Thanks to him, the tree minders have a home.
Besides the Great War, the 23rd century marks the biggest turning points for the capital Wasteland. Around 2237, what remained of the Naval Research Institute gathered at the far end of the Anacostia River, led by Horace Pinkerton. They set up the Rivet Station Science Outpost inside an old aircraft carrier, the very same that tried to leave. For a time, that was all Rivet City really was, a scientific community clinging to a dead ship. But it didn't stay that way for long. By April 2239, people started to settle around the outpost, drawn by its relative safety and stability. The population grew quickly enough that something more formal was needed, and so Rivet City was officially founded by Horace Pinkerton and a few other people, turning the carrier into a true settlement rather than just a research station. Power was handed to a 3-person council, with each member representing one of the 3 ship's major groups: scientists, civilians, and security. From those beginnings, Rivet City would steadily expand, eventually becoming one of the largest and most productive settlements found in the capital Wasteland. Another turning point for the Wasteland came in 2255, when the Brotherhood of Steel, led by Owen Lyons, arrived in search of pre-war technology. Within the first few months, they established a foothold inside the ruins of the Pentagon. The structure above ground was largely destroyed, but the sublevels had survived remarkably well. Even more importantly, its sealed stockpiles still housed valuable pre-war technology and weapons, enough to sustain their operations for many years. The real prize, though, was Liberty Prime. Its discovery proved significant enough to earn Lyons a battlefield promotion to Elder, along with new orders from Brotherhood leadership back in Southern California. He was to establish a permanent Brotherhood presence in the capital Wasteland and continue the search for any advanced technology still buried in the ruins of the old capital. Not long after their arrival, Lyons scouts began reporting a new and disturbing threat. A strange and unusually aggressive strain of supermutants had taken root in the near-abandoned ruins of downtown DC. Convinced these creatures represented the greatest danger to the Wasteland, Lyons committed the Brotherhood to a sustained campaign to wipe them out. It would drag on for more than 20 years, costing countless lives and burning through their resources at an alarming rate. Around that same time, the Brotherhood also lent its support to James and Catherine, 2 scientists working on an ambitious plan known as Project Purity. The goal was simple in theory and monumental in practice: a large-scale water purifier that could provide the Wasteland with a near-limitless supply of clean drinking water. The project failed to gain any real traction, even with Brotherhood backing. Frustrated with the results and still fighting mutants, Lyons pulled his forces, leaving Project Purity to stand on its own. The project collapsed, and Catherine lost her life during childbirth soon after, bringing that chapter of the Wasteland to a quiet and bitter end. For a time, the capital Wasteland was able to catch its breath. Between Rivet City's steady food supply and the Brotherhood's relentless campaign against the mutants, conditions stabilized just enough for human settlements to grow and new ones to appear. The most notable of these was Canterbury Commons, founded in 2258 by the Rowe siblings. What began as a simple homestead quickly became something more, forming the centre of a growing trade network that linked together numerous towns. Elsewhere, settlers attempted to make lives in more precarious places. Arafu clung to a half-collapsed overpass, while Greyditch was founded by wanderers who had travelled from as far as New California, building their home above an active ant's nest. But as the human population spread, so too did violence. Slavers operating out of Paradise Falls, an old shopping centre, took full advantage of the increased movement of traders and travellers. Emboldened by easy prey, they began raiding weaker settlements outright, capturing people in bulk rather than waiting for individuals to wander into their traps. At least two communities fell this way, Rockopolis and the town that would later be known simply as Minefield. Others never needed slavers to seal their fate. Some settlements were simply swallowed by the wasteland itself. Shacktown is a place with no reliable water, food, or real defences, and so it didn't last, and many just like it suffered similar fates. Even so, the capital wasteland continued to change. Old roads and rail lines were stripped for salvage or simply fell apart. Sometimes these changes created new homes for a few eccentric people, or entire bands of bloodthirsty pillagers. By 2277, raiders controlled large parts of the wasteland. Mostly their groups were small and messy, scattered across the region, killing whoever happened to walk by in search of food or water. But there was one group of raiders living at Evergreen Mills, the largest and most brutal of the bunch. The raiders here were close partners with the slavers of Paradise Falls, and they made a living selling the people they stole from. Nothing else to say about them other than they are quite prolific at capturing people, and not just humans but also mutants. Beyond these groups was another, the Talon Company. Rumours say an unknown client hired them to instigate a campaign of terror, preventing any meaningful recovery from taking place. And for a time, that seemed to be true. Still, people made do. Mercenaries did jobs people paid them to do. Others drank blood or ate their neighbours, and sometimes stories made their way to a certain 3-Dog, who shared the news with anyone willing to listen.
Hey everybody, this is 3-Dog, your friendly neighborhood disc jockey. What's a disc? Hell if I know, but I'm gonna keep talking anyway.
By 2277, the Brotherhood's grip on the capital wasteland was beginning to slip. Elder Lions had spent years pouring men and resources into the fight against the mutants, and the cost of that focus was becoming impossible to ignore. Raider gangs and slavers expanded unchecked as Brotherhood patrols were steadily pulled back. They had low numbers, and their stock of weapons and equipment were running dangerously low. Outside the Citadel itself, the Brotherhood held only a scattering of reinforced outposts, mostly within the city. Their ability to project power into the wider wasteland had been reduced to a shadow of its former strength. Lyons was able to prevent the chapter from collapsing, but the split with the Brotherhood outcasts in 2276, who wanted to get back to solely gathering technology, marked a clear breaking point for the chapter. Losing the outcasts meant losing experienced fighters, and a significant amount of equipment too. Desperate to fill the gaps, Lyons intensified recruitment and began sending barely trained initiates into active combat roles. The results were brutal. There were many casualties, even among those issued military-grade weapons and power armor. It was in this weakened state that a far more dangerous enemy appeared.
The Enclave is back, America. And no, not just on your radio. Right now, Enclave troops are patrolling the capital wasteland. These fine men and women, under the command of the stalwart Colonel Augustus Autumn, have one mission: the restoration of American peace and order. But let's hear from the man himself, shall we, America? I give you Colonel Augustus Autumn.
Thank you, Mr. President. People of the capital wasteland, I am Colonel Autumn. By now, you have encountered Enclave troops in your towns, in your settlements. When you see the Enclave, you see the United States government. We are authorized to restore order and civility by any means necessary. Just stay out of the way and let us do our job. Interfere with the Enclave's mission, and you will be dealt with. harshly.
Very good, Colonel. Very good. So, there you have it, my darling America. Enclave troops are now in your neighborhoods, in your lives, in your hearts. Together, we'll restore the glory of this great nation. One problem at a time.
Now, the abandoned purifier, long written off as a failure, was brought back to life by its former lead researcher, James, with the help of his child, now known as the Lone Wanderer. The situation escalated rapidly when the Enclave seized control of the purifier. Soon after, Madison Lee arrived at the Citadel along with the Lone Wanderer with proof that the purifier could be made fully operational, contradicting everything the Brotherhood had previously believed. Faced with the reality of the Enclave gaining control over the Wasteland's future, Lyons made his decision. Whatever condition his chapter was in, allowing the Enclave to dominate the capital Wasteland was simply not an option. He gathered what forces he had left and prepared them for a direct campaign against a far better equipped enemy. The conflict was plagued with setbacks, including the capture of the Lone Wanderer, who was retrieving a GEC at the time, needed to activate the purifier. But against the odds, Lyons' forces ultimately prevailed, and it's mostly thanks to Dr. Madison Lee getting Liberty Prime up and running. The Enclave's decision to mass their troops around the purifier wasn't the best idea, considering their enemy could suck the life out of force fields and throw nukes like giant footballs. The pre-war machine made short work of their defenses, securing the purifier for the Brotherhood. Even though Liberty Prime would later be destroyed in an ambush while hunting down the rest of the Enclave, its brief return changed everything. With the purifier active, the Brotherhood gained access to a reliable source of clean drinking water for the entire region. The operation itself was poorly organized, at least to begin with, but it marked a genuine shift in the Brotherhood's fortune. Combining this win with the eventual fall of Raven Rock, their main base, the death of their president, John Henry Eden, the loss of Adams Air Force Base, and the destruction of the mobile base Crawler, the Enclave had pretty much lost everything they had, in DC at least, and it would be a very long time before they could recover, if at all. And so, they became a minor threat in the grand scheme of things, allowing the Brotherhood of Steel to finally rebuild. Elder Lyons didn't live long enough to see what came next. He died within a year of the Enclave's defeat, and his daughter and chosen successor was killed in action not long after. Others tried filling the role of Elder, but the task was too great. Even so, the capital Wasteland was already beginning to change, and that change was accelerated by a boy, the direct descendant of Roger Maxon, the Brotherhood's founder. As the tale goes, Arthur was a Maxon through and through, killing raiders, preventing a super mutant called Shepard rebuilding an army, saving knights in the field, defeating a Deathclaw single-handedly, reintegrating the outcasts, and eventually, under the permission of the elders back west, becoming the youngest provisional elder the Brotherhood had ever seen, if you believe the stories. Under his leadership, the Brotherhood embarked on one of its most ambitious projects, the Prydwen, a vast airship created from scrap, tech, and pre-war designs salvaged from the Enclave. From the ruins of Washington, D.C., the Brotherhood steadily pushed its influence outward, extending its reach across the eastern seaboard. By 2287, the Brotherhood had secured firm control over the capital Wasteland, a dramatic reversal from the fragile and uncertain position it occupied a decade earlier. With the region now stable, the Brotherhood became an exporter of clean water and technology. Raiders were few and far between, slavers too, and the Children of Atom were able to spread its influence well beyond its borders. As of 2296, the furthest point in the timeline while remaining relevant, Arthur Maxon remains in command of the Eastern Brotherhood chapter. While exact conditions in DC are not fully known, the region is widely understood to be significantly more stable than before their takeover. The Brotherhood's control over the capital Wasteland, combined with access to clean drinking water and advanced pre-war technology, suggests that large-scale civilization has continued to grow under their influence. Raiders and slavers persist but no longer operate with the same reach or freedom they once had. As for the ghouls of Underworld, their situation remains uncertain, as they are often dismissed as abominations by surface society. Whether their position improves or worsens under continued Brotherhood rule is left unclear. But whatever the future holds, the capital Wasteland has, at least for now, a firm hand guiding the helm. Be sure to show your support by liking the video and subscribing if you haven't already for more Fallout content. If there's anything you'd like to see in a later video, leave a comment and I'll see what I can do. With that said, thank you, as always, for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.